so long that I want to go somewhere else and try it out, and
then
see that if I don't like it, I can come back. That's at least how I feel like it for now. I mean, it changes as you go on, like a PhD for like longer and longer, but at least in my current position, that's how I feel like.
Yeah, so and what I was getting with this is that in case you thought that PhD means I'm going to go into academia and that's my only option and I'm like closing doors, this is not the case. I mean, it's not the case, especially because of like all the new stuff that's happening in the world right now. Like, there's like cool stuff to do in almost every field, except maybe for like civil engineering. I don't know. I don't know what these folks do these days.
Hey, civil engineers do some really cool stuff. I thought that was lame, but now that I know a lot of civil engineers, actually, I sort of think like, wow, it would have been cool to be a civil engineer. At least from a fluids perspective.
Oh, I see.
I don't know, but the fluids stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
It's fine. Earthquake building stuff looks cool.
Yeah, right. There's some cool stuff. Don't knock the civil engineers.
So what are your plans?
I think I have a weird, I'm probably the only person, I don't know. I think I have a weird perspective on what graduate school means. To me, again, I can't do anything unless I've tried out like literally every possible option. So over the summer, before I came here, I worked in a department, a CFD department, where everyone was either a PhD or a master's student, and the guy leading it had been trying to be a professor. Who he almost led the department as a graduate advisor. It was really interesting. So there's a lot of opportunities in industry, which I think would be kind of cool. I like the freedom in just your day-to-day sort of activity that academia provides. Like, you get to kind of make up your daily schedule, which I like. And I actually recently talked to the vice president, what's her, Susan Murphy. I ran into her at an activity. One of those things where like you just say yes to something because you might get an interesting opportunity. So I met her and I said, hey, can we chat? What's it like to be a vice president? Because that's another opportunity, actually, that people don't talk about a lot. But there are, like, being a dean of a college, they went through PhDs and they became professors and then they become deans. Not everybody, but that's one of the pathways. So that's another thing I've been looking at. Like, oh, well, what would it be like to be to be a president of a university or to be a dean of a college? That would be kind of a cool thing. So I guess, to me, I'm getting my PhD because it's what I wanted to do now, and I think I had to take this approach to take some of the pressure off, to like, but what's your job going to be? Because my job could be anything. I could be a painter or whatever. Like, I'm doing the PhD because I'm getting paid to do it, and I enjoy what I'm doing right now.
You could be getting paid a lot more. But
I could not get up at noon and do Exactly. Exactly. So I guess my answer is I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm in the middle of an investigation that's very extensive.
I like the noon thing because I, for example, I wake up at 6:30 every day. Not because I have to. It's not like there is somebody like waiting for me in the laboratory. It's just that what I'm getting at is that in grad school you kind of make up your own schedule, right? Like if I'm more productive in the morning, I can get in at 8 and then leave, at 5. You might wake up at noon, but you leave, maybe you work late.
Actually, I work from like 6:30 to 6, but
like you make up your own schedule. Like you may slack off for an entire week and then catch up the next week. You might slack off for a month and catch up the next month. Like, as long as you're making progress, on a semester horizon, kind of like conference deadlines, journal paper deadlines, Q exam, A exam. As long as you're hitting your milestones. Like how you deal with your everyday stuff. Most advisors don't really care. Like they have their office, you have your office. Maybe it's in the lab, maybe it's not. You do your thing as long as there is some progress on not even on a weekly basis, even on a monthly basis. You're kind of free to do whatever you want with your schedule.
I'll note something on the scheduling thing because one of the things I found out, and this ties also into like how do you pick your advisor, because there's a very personal aspect to it. It's very, very important. Research is important. But research is important, but your personality is critical. You have to get along with your advisor on some level, and they have to work, you have to be compatible as work partners. So one of the reasons that I wanted to work with Olivier is because we do weekly meetings. Not every advisor does that. Not every advisor has it structured like that, but for me, as from a timekeeping perspective, it's good for me to have a weekly checkpoint to say, hey, did I make progress this week? Because I worked in this undergrad in this other lab that didn't ever have meetings, and it was hard for me to feel productive or to go in or just to get anything done at all. So it's good to know what you need as far as deadlines, and to kind of pick your advisor and your group based on, do they match up with those sorts of needs.
That's a good point, what did I want to say? Yeah, so one reason I decided to go to grad school is because I want to do robotics, and as you know, like robotics is just starting to be a thing, right? Like there's about like 12 companies doing robotics in the US. So a reason I wanted to do robotics, and I wanted to do like state-of-the-art robotics, not like, you know, industrial robotics, which it's been around since like the 60s or something. So I was like, where do you get to do state-of-the-art robotics? In a research program. And so, but after I graduated, it's not, I haven't decided what I want to do. So I want to do robotics, and I want to keep doing, you know, cutting-edge robotics. Whether that's going to be, you know, in Google, because they're interested in that now, whether it's going to be in my own research lab, whether it's going to be in a startup, I don't really mind, as long as I don't get into this routine of like, you know, just like, you know, consulting on an industrial robot, or like, you know, fixing up that bug that, you know, somebody found last night on the assembly line. As long as I don't do boring stuff, I don't really mind.
Yeah. When I came in, I like thought for sure that I wanted to be a professor, and like a lot of people did. Like you'd ask that question, and like half the people did. And like I'm not convinced of that anymore. Like I really love the research that I'm doing, and I would be more than happy to continue doing research or like work with like I'm not really sure, but like I would love to continue doing research at like an industrial company or something, like a national lab. I'm not really sure. And I also really enjoy teaching, so I would also be fine like working as a professor at like a more teaching institute. But I'm not really certain anymore that I want to lead a research group, because I realize that like a lot of what my professor does on a day-to-day basis is have meetings with people. So her life is very like scheduled hour to hour, and
it's more managerial than actually. Like,
yeah, and
she
writes grants and comes up with new project ideas, and like I would rather like work on the projects and like have like some independence over what projects I'm doing, and like come up with like new and cool stuff, but like I don't really want to be writing government grants and stuff like that all the time.
I put that in my application, ironically enough, because I like that part of it. I actually like that part better than the research. Research is fine.
Oh, the new idea part?
I like coming up with the ideas, I like leading the groups, and I like writing. I love to write. I love writing technical things. So I put that in my I was like, also, you know, I think I might be kind of good at being a professor, because I really like to write things, so you should hire me as a grad student. Actually, I'll do all your writing.
When I was applying, I was so certain that I didn't want to go into academia that in my statement of purpose, I said, I don't want to go into academia in the PhD application. And I honestly think that Princeton rejected me for that reason, because they're like a teaching institute, and they were like, who is that person who wants to go into industry? Yeah.
That's another thing, by the way. I feel like we're getting off on this tangent that we tried to leave, but there's also like a department, depending on the people they hire and the people they hire know. You can get a department where a lot of people go to industry or a lot of people go to academia. I don't know what Cornell is. Cornell seems kind of balanced, maybe more toward the academia side.
I wouldn't say Cornell, I would say, it's specific departments and specific labs even.
It's like my lab has not graduated anyone who's gone into academia.
Right.
For example.
Right. So that's another thing to consider, is what I'm saying. If you have an inclination one way or the other, it's something to think about as you're picking a group, because like Purdue only graduates people in industry. I mean, they have a professor once every blue moon. But like their department is a very industry-related department, so it's something to think about as well.
I want to bring up another issue. You guys reminded me that whether you are interested in switching fields, like you are now undergrads with a major in mechanical engineering, you know, doing a PhD in electrical or in aerospace. Is anybody interested, or like, well, you guys were wondering about it, right? So my experience is that it's easy to go from mechanical to aerospace, for example, but it's not easy to go like from mechanical to CS. Unless you can really demonstrate with like a minor or like actual experience that you have the background, because they're not going to admit you to a CS program so that you can take all the undergrad classes, catch up with everybody else, and then start your PhD. They're expecting you to kind of like be able to pull your own weight to pass your Q exam. So I applied to a few electrical engineering programs. I didn't get accepted to any of them. They were like badass schools too, so I didn't apply to like mediocre EC programs, but I didn't get to any of them. And I think the reason is that in Greece we don't have the idea of a major and a minor. So I only had a major, let's say, in mechanical engineering. So I had taken like 0 CS classes and only like circuits as far as ECE goes. So I think the reason they rejected me is that because, you know, you'll spend 2 years just catching up with everybody else. Why admit you, right? But if you're minoring in something.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt your train of thought, although there's a girl in our cohort who was a CS major, that's all she had done. CS in like math or something, but very much not, I'm talking about Ilsa.
Yeah.
And I mean, she did have to do a little bit of catch up. I think she's probably spent about maybe a year, maybe just a semester of catch up, but it's not impossible. I think you're probably right.
I've met more people coming from a generic topic like applied math or engineering physics or something like that, or even physics coming to Meki. Because Meki is like pretty broad, right? And if you go from like engineering physics to doing fluids, it's not crazy, or even control systems. But if you're now doing, you know, like combustion engines, right? You can't really go to compilers for your PhD, right? It's like you spend so much time catching up, and they have no idea if you have the potential, because your recommendation letter will say this person has potential, but I know him as a Meki. That's implied, right? If your recommendations are all from mechanical professors, who's going to vouch for you being to have potential in CS, right? So maybe I'm too pessimistic, but I think about that.
I mean, I think it can be, if you want to do that, then a good approach would be to like do an NN or something like that in the other field before you go apply.
Or get a recommendation because of your minor, or like take a graduate level class in CS maybe, and like try to get a recommendation from that. Or somebody has to like, something in your application has to imply that you have potential in this new field that you want to get into, whether it's CS or civil engineering. Like, going from Meki to civil I think makes more sense honestly than going from like, than other combinations. Yeah.
CS isn't that hard. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah, let's go to the Q&A because we've been
talking too much.
I mean, coming straight off that was the question about recommendations and going about them. Most grad schools require 3, right?
Yeah.
And like, so personally, me, I can like muster up like 2 good recommendations from a professor that I actually know, but like a 3rd recommendation is going to be from just a professor whose class I did well in or something like that. So is that like a big deal, or
yeah?
I would say you should definitely try. It doesn't necessarily have to be a professor. It can be someone from a company you work for, like someone from an internship. I did that. You want to get someone whose name will carry some weight, or whose position will carry some weight. That helps a lot. And you definitely want to get it from someone who knows you well enough on a personal level. Don't get one from a class.
There is a name for that. Did well in class. DWIC recommendation. Where it's like, you know, it's like you have a template. You know, blah blah blah. John took my class, blah, and took this grade, blah. Like you fill up the template, you get like your recommendation. Yeah. I'm not saying they do that. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But you know, there is nothing personal to say there, right? How many people took that class? How many people did just as well as you did, right? Yeah.
You want to have it. I did that actually. I got a recommendation from someone that I took a class with because a different recommendation fell through, which is a nasty story, but it's okay. It's all fine. Anyway, so I did that. I got a recommendation from a professor, but it was a professor that I had a relationship with. Like I took the class, and the class wasn't even really related, but basically I had spent a lot of time like talking to this person, and I also kind of like just knew him a little bit. So I think it's okay if all you've done is had a class, if you have a relationship with the person. You want to have a real relationship.
Come to think of it, I did get kind of one of these recommendations too. It was my 3rd one, but I had taken 3 classes from that guy, and he was a roboticist too. So when I showed him, you know, my undergrad research, like very briefly, he could appreciate what I had done. It wasn't like, what is this jibber jabber? I don't care, you know, I have a screwdriver here. So he could appreciate that what I've done as an undergrad was pretty decent. I got a paper out of it. So he wrote me a recommendation later, not because he was working with me every day, but because he could appreciate what I had done, because it was robotics, and because I had taken 3 classes from him. So, you know, he did well in all 3 of them, must be something there, you know.
I guess another example of that, so I had a professor who I took a 2-semester course from an undergrad. I didn't work in his lab or anything like that, but I ended up spending a lot of time in his office, like my senior year, bugging him with questions about my research that was you know, in my, so he does plasma physics, and I was doing plasma physics experiments for my current advisor, but I had taken his classroom, so I basically spent like, I was in his office probably at least once every other week, like all of senior year, bugging him with questions about plasma physics. And so I asked him for recommendation letters. And I think, yeah, it can be okay if it's like someone you just took a class from, you don't necessarily work with them, as long as you have some kind of relationship beyond just sitting in the lecture hall.
And this is where like doing like, semester projects at one of the labs is so important because, you get recommendations. You get to see what you like and you get recommendation letters if you do it. Questions? Yeah.
So mine goes back to something that Stephanie said earlier. It has more to do with when, like the logistics of when you should go contact professors. Like you said, you contacted Professor Bezerlin.
Oh, this is a good question.
So where in the application process, like the informal application process, I guess outside of it.
So I guess you two already knew at least, who you ended up working with, but how did you contact others?
I just start looking at like other schools' website and maybe looking at papers where like my current advisor is doing and like what they reference to, and you start looking to those people. Are they doing something that you like to do? If so, you go to look more about their work and things like that.
Did you email them?
Yeah, and then you start emailing them. Most of the time, they probably won't reply just because they can get like, I don't know, like hundreds of emails every day. So what you can do, you can keep trying, or you can, if you're working with someone, your research advisor, maybe you can start talking to her. Maybe asking her like, is there a way that I can get in contact with her? Since like she knows the other person probably personally, she has more like connections. She may get you to the person, so at least she'll answer your email. That's how you start, I think, like your communication with the potential.
I think I started emailing professors around like October, and I maybe heard back from like a third or half of them.
How were you guys emailing them? Were you asking questions or were you saying, I'm responsible?
Yeah, and
So
how much do you have to say
that's
about
the
your
thing.
research?
Okay,
Like,
so this is I have two sides, because actually there was a guy, and this poor guy. I had been in a class with him at Purdue, I guess. I didn't even remember him. But he had my contact information. He started emailing me. He Skype chatted me. He every other week, hey, and doing the same thing to my advisor. And we were like, we talked about it. We were like, we should definitely not take this person. No, he's obnoxious. So you don't want to overdo it. And so for me, like on that question, I emailed as milestones. And since I didn't have insightful questions to ask, I basically said, hey, I like your research. This is what I've done. Please take a look at my application. Or like, hey, I got an NSF fellowship, just so you know, and I still want to work with you. Or like, hey, I just heard back from Purdue and they've admitted me, but I'm still more interested in your program. So for me, it was just like, I'm here, and having mentioned him in my application, I think it's like, you just draw attention. You're like, you're the person who's been around.
I put a lot of thought into it because I was coming from Greece, right? I wasn't coming from like an Ivy League school or like MIT or something. So I had to really like somehow get my application out of the huge pile and into somebody's hands, right? So yeah, I took this double-sided approach. So around November and even December, I was sending these emails that were like, very simple. No question. There was not a single question in the email. It was like, I'm this person, I'm coming from this lab because it's kind of well known. I would like to let you know that I'm applying or that I just applied. I wasn't asking, whether they have like money from me or something. I was just, I'm gonna apply or I just applied. Here's like my short bio because, by the time the application gets to them, they wanna know something about you, right? I made sure that I've written a paper, of course you do that, like you did your NSF thing. And then I'm like, this is what I've done in this lab, some underwater vehicle stuff. And then I was like, looking at your website and your papers, this is, roughly what got me excited. Not what necessarily I wanna do or else, but this is why I'm even interested in you because that paper of yours, I really found it interesting. So you're not committing to anything. You're just saying, I've done my homework. I know why I'm applying. I'm not begging for anything. Just take a look. I got a 90% response rate in my emails. Yeah. Some of them were like, just like, thanks for contacting me. Some of them were like, entire paragraphs. Some of them were like, oh, say hi to your advisor from me. It was like some of them personally, yeah. So, and then whoever I sent an email to, I mentioned in my statement of purpose, and I even said, I'm interested in working with this, and this folk, and I've already contacted them via email. You know what this does? When your application goes to the admissions office and they see those names, they send copies to those names.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
And then suddenly your application is out of the huge pile of generic applications. Yeah. Any more questions? Yeah.
I have a question. You had mentioned this earlier, but what are graduate schools really looking for? I'm actually a sophomore, and I'm not involved in research, but I'm involved in a project team. And what are some things that I could do or should do in undergraduate?
You should get the largest variety of research experience
Mhm.
and the most that you possibly can. Like I had like 4 different internships / company experiences, and everyone that I talked to was like, wow, like you've done so much, like this is why you stick out, and like we know that you're going to be good at research because you've proven that like you can be. Like if you only have like one short research thing, and if you haven't really like interacted with professors or done anything like that, like how are they going to know how well you'll do in their group?
So we didn't have many project teams in my undergrad, so I can't talk about that. But while a project team teaches you a lot of stuff, and not just about like solving a problem, but about team communication and collaboration and all that. It's not exactly research. So I feel like you should at least give it a try. It's gonna tell you if you want even gonna go to grad school, right? Like if you find it super boring or like frustrating, you have your answer there, right?
Okay, thank you.
It should be frustrating.
It should be frustrating in the way that learning a new skill is frustrating. Like when you pick up a guitar for the first time, it's frustrating, but do you enjoy this frustration? Or are you like...
Basically, are you a masochist? Come to grad school. If you really like to beat yourself up.
Yep. No. Let's do one last question.
I knew I was going to ruin this somehow.
Yep, one last question.
Can you have your own researching topic eventually during your PhD program?
What do you mean by
your own topic?
Like, say you come up with something, you want to do something independently.
That's interesting.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. So,
especially if you have funding.
yes. So if you can somehow fund an idea because you have a fellowship, you have more say in what you work on, right? If you're being paid by your advisor, sometimes you either have to do something out of you either have to do something and just you have a say in how you solve it, or you have to pick from a finite number of options. These are the 4 projects that we're running. Which one are you the best fit for, or which one do you want more? So I was in this category, but I've kind of created opportunity for myself. So at first I kind of had to I suggested a few topics. My advisor said, no, I'm not interested in pursuing these 3. This one, okay, let's discuss it. And then I started with that, and then I published a paper on that, and then a semester later, through an undergraduate project, as I was supervising the student, he came up with something interesting, and so we got a new research direction from that. And then, a new grant came in, so now I'm working on a 3rd thing. So if you're open-minded, like Zac was saying, you will do cool stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really good to have that attitude. You want to work on the stuff that you think is cool. Basically what it comes down to in practice, I think, is finding money to do it. And there's clever, creative ways to do that too. So one of the things that I think that my advisor says, we all have to do things to pay the bills. So you get a grant for project X, you're gonna have to put some time into that, and that'll pay the bills. And then in your other 10, 20 hours a week, whatever it ends up being, you do it, other things. So I mean, you're gonna probably have to do some things that aren't necessarily the most exciting thing and the thing you really want to be doing, but you'll definitely you can do whatever you want, subject to the constraints of funding, and maybe if you can find a way to pay for it, you can definitely do it. And there's lots of ways to do that.
And you know what's another great way to do what you want to do? Be very good at it. If you are a superstar, you get to do whatever you want. Seriously, yeah.
I would say though, I was surprised to find out that and I don't know how true this is for experimentalists, but I was surprised to find that you are also kind of becoming a part of a team. So from our perspective, for me, I didn't really know if we can either kind of look at new physics, right? We can either say, okay, we're going to look at this, or you can look at the numerical side of things and develop new algorithms so that you can look at new physics. And I thought I would be more on the other side, where I've ended up doing a lot of numerical stuff. And a lot of that is because our guy that did a lot of numerics left. He's gone. So we need somebody to develop the numerics. Everybody else can look at new stuff. And my advisor, he didn't push me. He didn't say you have to do this or that. But he'd be like, hey, what about this project? What about this? What about this? And they're all numerics. And hey, we really have to replace Mark. These are little things.
You got the blue, dude.
Yeah, and it's interesting to realize that oh, I can fit into this larger thing, and I think there's something kind of fun from that. So you're doing what you want to do, absolutely, don't give that up. But also, yeah, I guess just be flexible, because you never know.
I had a very similar experience to that. the stuff I've ended up doing. So like I want to do aerospace stuff, I want to do dynamics and control stuff. I ended up on the satellite project, and we had to figure out how to make the radios work and like do this communication stuff. And there was like, we kept trying to get ECE MENGs on the project to do this. It basically never worked out. And there was this problem that had to get solved to make this work. So I ended up having to do it. And I learned a ton of stuff in the process, and it wasn't stuff I really wanted to do. And I kind of resisted it at first. And I spent like a year like really hunkered down on this problem and like learned a ton of stuff. And like I'm glad I did it now. But yeah, I think it's again like being open-minded and being flexible and stuff. And yeah, there's like a team aspect to this.
And the ways that your professor sometimes like pushes you or just kind of suggests things for you to look at, like, I mean, they're experts in their field for a reason.
Yeah.
So, and that's because they like know everything that's been done and have ideas for stuff that's being done. So collaborating with them on projects is
Which
like
reminds
the most
me,
advisable
the
thing.
first thing you will have to do besides, after or in parallel with taking classes, you have to know what's your field and what has already been done. There is no way to contribute in your research unless you know what has already been done. So that involves like literature surveys. You have to read a ton of papers to see what has already been done in your field, so you can then do another step forward. Otherwise,
You have to get to the frontier.
Yes. So like there's this funny.
There's a long climb to get there.
So like there's this funny image on the internet where it's like, this is the realm of everything there is to know in your field. You start here knowing nothing. It's like as you go out, it's more like newer stuff. So you start here, you do your undergrad, you get to that. You do like you do your MNs maybe, you go like that, and then in your PhD you first have to like read all that stuff and become very competent, and then by the end of your PhD program you made a dent in the universe. It's like that's your PhD. that's how it is.
That's like from what XKCD.
I think so. Yeah. So that's how it is, and like this seems tiny, but somebody has to do. Many people do a tiny thing, and then this thing grows bigger.
I think in the comic they had some idea of like your view of the world was like a little dot around here, and it looked really big. And in the grand scheme of things, we're all very insignificant.
Yeah. Okay, so
none of our problems really matter.
I think this is a good point. Like, on that note,
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank all 5 of them for coming out and sharing.
Contact information if they have more
Let's
questions.
put them on the. Let's
Yeah.
and let's not put that in the video though.
Yep.
Thank you guys so much.